Welcome, Cheryll Watson, to our BPW Edmonton mayoral candidate interview.
Thanks for having me.
Awesome. So the October 18th election is right around the corner, and our community is really eager to hear from you specifically and understand your style as a leader. So as you know, our vision is to one day have a boundless world where everyone reaches their full potential. We do this by developing professional, business, and leadership potential in women, primarily through advocacy and education. So can you tell us a little bit about how you support your team in reaching their full potential?
Let me begin and first tell you how much I appreciate you asking me this question, because I am a leader that believes in values, that believes in really being deliberate about the environment that you're creating. And you are the first organization, association that I have spoken to since I started this work nearly a year ago that's asked me a question like this. And I think that it's so important. And I come from a background in an organization called Intuit. And they are a very focused organization on creating a great culture, on being really true to their values. And so that's the environment that I'm used to operating within. That is unique in campaigns. And so I'm really working to try and turn the tide in politics. So when we first started this work, as I said, about a year ago, I began asking people that I'd worked with in the past, people that I had huge respect for, people that had been supporters of mine, or I had been supporters of theirs, to join this team and really help me bring this vision of our city to life. And I began with talking about my own personal values. I talked about my family's values. And I said that the first thing that we were going to do as a team was co-create values for our campaign. And then from there, we started talking about how do we create a defined beliefs and behaviors, like what's our ethos for our campaign team. So all of this really, really resonates with me, because it is what creates an environment for people to be successful in. And so thank you for that question. I hope that I talked even just a little bit about the brief journey of how we began as a campaign team. And this is now part of our DNA. And everyone that joins, members of the team, and we have a very big tent type team and a number of women on our team as well. But this commitment to really team empowerment by making sure that you have a common belief system and a common ethos, I think is really important. It's going to be one of the things that really helps us to be successful.
Awesome. That's great. I think that's so important, not only for somebody who's running for a campaign, but anyone who's leading a team or leading a business. Having that shared set of values is so important. It's arguably one of the most important things. So what would you say, just following up on that, what would you say are your kind of core values that you've built with your team?
Number one, to employ the golden rule. And so, growing up, this is one of the most basic values that many of us were taught around treating others as you would have yourself treated. That we are going to do our best to stay above the fray. And at times that takes courage. And we have to really remember why we're all doing this. And then, one of our common team values as well is not taking ourselves too seriously. And really, making sure that this is an experience that we all can be proud of, and it's work that we can all collectively be proud of. Some of our values just talk about our commitment to the team and how we are going to help each other throughout this long campaign. We talk about values of passing the baton, really kind of raising your hand when you say, hey, I need a break. And so how do you then allow the team to support you? So like I say, there's some really core values about behavior. I share my values with the team that are collaboration, accountability, servant leadership, empathy, humility. And so there are a lot of them based around that as well. And we talk about those values often.
That's so great. I know it's so common for businesses and groups like yours to build these values. And oftentimes where it tends to fall down is modeling or kind of enforcing those values, or sometimes it's easy to build them and then it's hard to really make sure that those are lived. So how do you model that with your team?
Well, it's funny that you say that. And I was kind of looking over on the wall here because I have my values and our team's values, they're taped on the wall. And we have them throughout the campaign office because it is at times easy to get caught up in the day-to-day, caught up in the activity of things. It's easy to get caught up in emotions. And so really having this reminder that, you can't help but notice and then really take the moment to reflect and say, are these decisions in line with my values? Are these behaviors ones that we have collectively committed to honor? So making sure that they're visible and that they're talked about.
Awesome. I think that makes such a difference, just having them visible for people to see and building an environment where you're being reminded of that is great. You mentioned that you have a diverse team. Do you have a statement on diversity, equity, and inclusion that you could share with us?
We don't have a specific statement, but we are demonstrating that. And I think that one of the main reasons that I step forward to do this is that we have a need for more diversity or representation, you might say, in the most important governing table of our city. 50% of the population are women. And then when you look around, like when you walk down the street of Edmonton, do the people that are currently sitting at our table represent the people that you see every day? And they're not. And that's why this election, I say often that this election will be the most important election that we have had in nearly a decade, because this is our opportunity to have a more diverse table that sits at that leadership table, that are the ones that are governing our city. They're the ones that are crafting policies. And let me share a little bit more about why I think that's so important. So you can have a diversity and inclusion statement, but that's very different from people that are designing services and experience services from their own experience. That's very different. So I recently announced a Safe City for Women and Girls policy, and it's modeled after the UN Women, some of the recommendations that they have made globally. And what's a little bit disappointing, though, is this commitment to the UN Women's Safe City for Women and Girls model was made years ago by Mayor Iveson, but it was never implemented. And so it's very different when you have a woman leading our city who every day of her life really views the city through a different lens. The other night at probably around 10:30 at night, I decided to go walking around my neighborhood to see whether or not I felt safe at the bus stop down the block, whether I would feel safe walking from one bus stop to another. And I didn't. And that's how our city has been designed, is by a single demographic. And so if we have a better diverse representation at that governing table, we're going to create a more inclusive city. We're going to create more inclusive system.
I love it. I can tell this is something that you're really passionate about, and that's, I think, really obvious when you speak about it. And it's not just about checking a box; it's about living those values, and that's obviously something that you're doing. That's great. Talking a little bit more about the nitty-gritties of your platform, can you tell me, what do you think is the highest priority financial challenge facing Edmonton right now, and how would you address those?
Well, I would say that the single issue is that we potentially face a financial crisis. And that is because we have spent outside of our mandate often and broadly. And what I mean by that is that, like any organization, we have a mandate. City of Edmonton's mandate is dictated by the Municipal Government Act that says what our responsibilities are. And there are things like infrastructure. They're not always sexy. There are sidewalks and there are roads and there are parks. And those are meaningful services that we all rely on. And what's happened, though, over the years through best intent is we have continued to expand the programming and services that we're delivering as a city into other people's work. And we have found ourselves in a state where we are competing with other nonprofits, private industry, other orders of government. I heard our mayor say quite recently that we're $20 million outside of our mandate when it comes to our homelessness commitment. And that's a critical, important issue. It is. But we have a means and a mandate and a responsibility area. And if we continue to do other people's work, then we can't afford to do our own work. And so I think it's getting back to what's our mandate and how do we deliver excellence within that mandate at an affordable cost to citizens that live here.
That's great. And you touched on it a little bit just now, but how do you think, or what would you say are our top priorities, social challenges, and how does that impact the financial side?
Well, the way that my policies have been created are through conversations. And so since October, when I declared my intent to run for mayor, I've been asking people what they think our most important issues are. And the population of underserved and overlooked comes top of mind to everyone that I speak to. And so I am not interested in making unrealistic statements or promises that we're going to end homelessness or we're going to end poverty. These are global issues and they're very, very complex. But I want to do what I can as a mayor to lead our city to serve the population in very meaningful ways. So we announced a basic needs policy, and that really gets at the fact that water is a basic human need. And so we announced a policy that said that we will install 50 water stations around the city, whether they are at parks or whether they are at public buildings, so that there's access to water. We announced that there should be access to public washrooms. And during COVID, we all saw ourselves that we couldn't access the washrooms that we used to, through socially conscious businesses. And so how does the city recognize that that's within their core mandate? And so we should have public washrooms. And so the basic needs policy really looked at all of the things that city can directly control and we defined some very specific policies around basic needs, around how we can better use some of our land assets, and how we can support the 60 agencies that are directly responsible for serving that community. And then I'll flip over and then say safety is also something that I hear often about. And tragically, we're reading about more and more incidents of women in this city being attacked and experiencing violent acts. And that cannot continue. That is not the city that we should be, that any of us would say is acceptable, because when you have an unsafe city, that means that 50% of your population is not free to travel. They're not able to contribute to society. How do they feel safe to get their children to school? How do they get to work? How do they get to school? And so the UN Women would say that if you create a safe city for women and girls, you create a safe city for everyone. And so again, we took some of their very practical policies that have been proven in cities around the world, and that's the policy that we announced.
That's great. These are such fundamental things. So I'm glad that these are priorities for you. What would you say is your top priority? You talked about so many good things, so many great things what would you say is your number one priority if you were elected?
The vision statement is to build a city that works. And really that comes back to those of us that are using the services of the city and making sure that they are seamless, that they help solve the needs that we have. So I had the opportunity when I worked for Intuit to work all around the world. I spent a lot of time in a number of really, really great cities around the world where transportation systems are designed where you get off your plane, you jump on a train, the train delivers you directly to your hotel, and you're not even conscious of the fact that these services are just smooth. They're simple. And so a city that works really talks about just making sure that the city services that are delivered, I would love to say delightful, but imagine if we could tap on the transit. These are things that have been around for decades in other cities. Imagine if it were simple for you to renew your street parking. Right now, there's a lot of friction and rub in our services, and they're critically important for Edmontonians, and we need to make them as simple as possible. And so that's about building a city that works. And it's a city that works for all, for young, for our seniors, for people that live on the north side, for people that live on the west end, whether you're a newcomer to this city, whether you were born and raised here like I was. It's really to create a city that works for all Edmontonians.
Awesome. And it does sound like that's something that would impact, so many of us. So that's great to hear. Is there anything else that you would want our members or the BPW Edmonton community to know about you?
Well, here's what I haven't shared, and I did just briefly, is I was born and raised here in Edmonton. I am a proud North Side girl. I grew up in the community of Beverly. And the reason that I'm doing this is out of love for this city. And while I highlight during our conversation some of the things that I think can be better, there's so many great things that we have here. And it's one of the reasons that I've continued to choose Edmonton. And like many of you and your membership, I'm sure there were times in your career where there was a choice that you had to make. Whether to remain in Edmonton or perhaps to pursue a career opportunity outside of Edmonton. This city is worth the commitment. And I love your organization because it's one of the very, very unique things about Edmonton that I still love and talk about a lot. It's this commitment to community.
That's great.
It's about this very unique characteristic that Edmonton has that says we help each other, that where we have an opportunity to make an introduction, we make it. And so the last thing that I would say to your membership is, please, if I haven't met you yet or had a conversation with you, please book time with me. I have throughout my career created events and opportunities all focused on how we as a community of women in this city are here to help each other, to lift each other up. And if I can be helpful to any one of your membership on a personal level, please don't hesitate to reach out. I'd love to meet more of you. So there was a very easy way to do that. CherylWatson.ca. There's a place to go and connect with me. I'd love to hear your story and talk more about my love for this city and hopefully either help you and or get your support to help me lead our city forward.
That's great. Thank you so much, Cheryl. This was very informative, and it was great just to learn more about your leadership style and your values, just how much you do care about Edmonton. So thank you so much for your time. We're looking forward to hearing more about your campaign leading up to the October 18th election.
Thanks, Jill. Pleasure to meet you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.